السلام عليكم جميعا. اتكلمنا في حلقة فاتت عن مؤامرة التلوث بسبب إشاعات شركات الجيل الخامس اللي هو ال 5G وعلاقة الكلام ده بكوفيد 19. النهارده الحلقة مختلفة شوية. النهارده هنقابل اتنين يعتبروا من الخبراء في المجال دوت واللي اشتغلوا فيه من أول ما ابتدى، من أول ما قلنا يلا نعمل 5G. وهنسالهم عن ايه هي ال 5G وايه رايهم باللي بيحصل النهارده، وهل ليه علاقه فعلا بالفيروس ولا لا، او هل شركات ال 5G فعلا ليها اضرار على صحه الانسان وليه وازاي. فعلى فكره المقابله كلها هتبقى باللغه الانجليزيه لانهم ما بيتكلموش غير انجليزي، وبس ممكن تفعل خاصيه الترجمه. احنا هنضيف ترجمه للفيديو، ممكن تفعلها بالضغط على في هتلاقي الكلوزد كابشنز، هتلاقي حرفين سي ورا بعض كده موجودين في الحته، اعتقد ان هي في الحته ديت لو انا بشاور صح، وانا هشاور عليها بسهم عموما خلال الفيديو ان شاء الله لما نعمل الايديتنج يعني. طيب معانا المهندس مانويل فيكسلار، وهو معاه درجه الماجستير في هندسه الالكترونيات الطبيه او بايوميديكال الكترونكس انجينيرنج، وشهادتين من جامعه كورنيل في امريكا، وشهاده في هندسه واداره الشبكات من جامعه تورونتو، وشهاده ثانيه في الاداره التنفيذيه من جامعه كوينز كينغستون اونتاريو كندا. المهندس فيكسلار اشتغل في شركات كتير عالميه بتشتغل في مجال الشبكات زي سيسكو، هواوي، الكاتيل لوسنت، ودلوقتي بيشتغل محاضر في جامعه كورنيل، وهو كمان برضه في نفس الوقت المدير الفني التنفيذي السي تي او لشركه بتشتغل في مجال ال 5G. ومعانا برضه المهندس دان مارتن، مهندس بيشتغل في تشغيل وتحليل جوده الشبكات وتطبيق تقنيات التعليم العميق والذكاء الصناعي اللي هو ديب ليرنينج ارتفيشال انتليجنس في اداره الشبكات خصوصا. واشتغل في المجالات دي في شركات كبيره زي اي بي ام مثلا، وبرضه في مجالات الاتصالات وال5G في شركات كبيره في المجال ده زي شركه هواوي، غير برضه شركه فيرايزن واي تي ان تي اللي هم يعتبروا اكبر اثنين شركتين محمول هنا في امريكا. Okay, welcome Dan and Manuel. It's a pleasure to have you both here in our YouTube channel, Truth or Conspiracy. We can go ahead and start with Dan on what, if you can explain to us what 5G is, and very basic layman terms without much technical jargon, and how 5G is different from 4G. What is exactly 5G, and is it introducing something new than what we have already with 4G, for example?
So if you have to think about these telecom standards as being conservative. Mm-hmm. So this is incremental improvement, not revolutionary improvement. Mm-hmm. There's a couple new frequencies involved, some wavelengths that we haven't been using before. But this is an organization, these standards come from organizations that are composed of carriers and people who sell things to carriers. So the chance of disruption is pretty slim. Mm-hmm. Now, there are some detail improvements in 5G that let more people attach to a tower, that let some efficiencies in scale and architecture be realized, this virtualization stuff. And the biggest single difference seems to be, and I think that the cause of some speculation or concern is this millimeter wave stuff. So millimeter wave, we use it now, it's called, if you use radar guns, it's K-band or Ka band. Radar guns, radar detectors, plenty of other public uses for the spectrum. And the promise behind millimeter wave is that I'll be able to get more bandwidth, right? And also less latency. But that's really about it. Some detail improvements, and think incremental, not revolutionary. We don't do revolutionary. Even long-term evolution is evolution, not revolution.
Okay, so but don't you think, and maybe we can hear from Martin if you agree, disagree, but don't you think that latency and that extra bandwidth that 5G offers over 4G would open the door for so many other applications to come, or what do you think?
We have to, it's the applications that have to drive this. So there aren't really, and it's going to be an incremental approach. So as the applications gets more real time, they'll put the compute closer to the edge. But don't forget, this low latency doesn't describe anything except the air interface. So it's how long it takes the handset to get to the tower, not how long your data takes to get from the tower anywhere else.
So we are trying to build the infrastructure or the platform for other applications to come. That's actually, at least this is my understanding. And let's hear it from Manuel too.
And then it's right in the sense of evolution. We definitely cannot financially and physically create a completely new network and a new way to approach to mobile communications. However, from an applications viewpoint and services viewpoint as well, there are a large number of classes of services that are poorly or they were not available with 3G and 4G. The largest class is what's called IoT, Internet of Things, which is a world of millions and billions of sensors interconnected to measure and to help humans live better, essentially. From sensors that help with healthcare, help with identifying people temperature, for instance, if we want to get down to that level, to sensors that are very much applied in industrial. That's an area that usually mobile services were not integrated with the network. And this is where industrial applications come in, from robotics to also measuring or creating industrial processes.
And it's interesting that you also mentioned, and this is exactly what actually created that, I'm not going to say illusion, but created the conspiracy theory that, you know what, because of the IoT of things, there is a potential for governments or, you know, New World Order to inject sensors in everyone's body and try to track them, or you know, those, and especially what Dan also mentioned about the wavelengths and whatnot, because of that high frequency that 5G uses, that could be actually what's causing everything right now, COVID-19 and whatnot.
I would address the wavelengths separately because there is a little bit of physics class that I can provide in 2 minutes. Let's look at COVID-19 because that's one of the latest worried about 5G and how it promotes COVID-19. Let's look at telemedicine. Now that doctors and nurses are extremely busy with critical ill patients, a 5 minutes visit can save a life, literally. And this visit is through telemedicine. What 5G brings is connectivity, high quality video and connectivity in places that doesn't exist yet, that kind of connectivity.
But don't we already have this with 4G?
We have, but 4G is not everywhere. And also 4G, it's more in the developed world. Under the developing countries are still behind. They are still in the 3G. For example, Latin America is probably only 20% 4G LTE speaking. The other thing is the amount of sensors. So doctors, how doctors work, they hook you to different devices in order to measure your parameters, your physical and physiological parameters.
Vitals, yeah.
So to take the vital signs with 4G, it's much more complicated. As Dan indicated, actually, with 4G, the latency is fairly high. We're talking about time-critical elements. We want to measure the patients quickly. So there is, and back to what Dan said, yes, there is incremental progress, and yes, there is possible also to do a lot of these services through 4G.
It seems, well, everyone was promising, most carriers over the world were promising that by 2020, we will have commercially available 5G networks. But do you think, maybe Dan can shed some light on this, do you think we will really have 5G networks live commercially available in 2020? Whether it's going to be in the US, Europe, North Africa, or Asia. What do you think?
Well, and here's where Manuel's actually shed some light on this in terms of rollouts. So as I said before, these companies are conservative. They're not going to spend money just because they can. And even if they had money to spend, which they don't, because revenues are
Especially in
flat
light
and
of what's going
falling.
on right now, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So revenues are flat or falling. So what they're going to do is they're going to roll out the new stuff in markets that can absorb it and where they'll make money. To think that they'll roll this out everywhere is a wonderful idea, but we're not going to see that happen. It'll be incremental, and it'll probably slow down as we speak, because your point about these viruses in the economy is all true. They don't have any money, and they're not going to spend a penny what they can't make a dollar.
No, but when you say it's true, you're not linking the virus to the 5G networks.
Oh, no, not at all. It's the economy. If people don't have any money, they're not going to give it to the phone company.
Yes, I agree. I kind of have to agree. But since, I mean, Manuel, since your field of study is actually in biomedical engineering, what do you think of the safety of the 5G? Is it really safe? Is it the argument that it can actually, it's very cancerous? And I've seen some videos taping dead like animals or dead birds specifically next to 5G towers. What, I mean, do you think there is some truth into it?
Well, Photoshop is great these days. I don't want to definitely make an advertisement, but consider Photoshop. And we have the technology actually to check the authenticity of this kind of pictures, but let's not go there. Let me go back, because I mentioned actually, I'm going to talk about what's called millimeter waves, because 5G really, unlike 4G, uses low to medium frequencies and high frequencies. And the high frequencies are just being actually awarded, for instance, in the US by the FCC, and companies pay billions of dollars to reserve their spectrum, but it's unused. So let's talk a little bit about the radio waves, the radiations in general. So there are really two types of radiation, and that covers the whole universe, from heat to ultraviolet to radio waves, which obviously we cannot see or feel. And there are two types. There are non-ionizing. These are radio waves that really do not interfere with living matter, birds or humans or lab animals. And there's ionizing. So the class of ionizing is known by a long time as being interfering with the human biology. And the class of ionizing includes X-rays, gamma rays, and they really affect the DNA of living animals and humans. However, and I haven't heard yet about people getting worried about an X-ray, which really in large quantities can damage the cells. So the rest of the waves, starting with heat, and radio waves, including the millimeter waves to be used in 5G, important to be used because they are not used yet. Maybe in percentages as 3% of the towers are 5G millimeter waves. These are not interfering with the human or the living animals. However, like anything in the world, quantity matters. So infrared, which we call it heat in general, we know very well we don't put our hand on a hot stove. Why? A high quantity of infrared burns your skin. When we talk about radio waves, when we talk about cellular waves, we're talking about infinitesimal quantities of radiation. And these are not harming the human wave. The same way, we're not going to stay in a freezing room. We need some heat. We don't need too much heat because we feel bad. We do not need too much heat because we get burned. And this is it, really. The 5G or all the radio waves, including with your FM radio in the car, are non-ionizing waves, which are not interfering with the human body.
And that includes the 5G as well, because if I recall correctly, the ionizing range starts from 10 terahertz probably and over, and I can't remember the frequency of 5G. I think it's like something in the
20 gigahertz, which will be 1,000 or a few thousand orders of magnitude smaller.
Oh, okay, exactly, yeah. Okay, and that's definitely in the non-ionizing range.
Right, not even close.
And from my understanding, there are actually some medical equipments that uses some kind of, aside of course from the sound wave, there are others that uses some kind of non-ionizing frequency to diagnose and whatnot, right?
Sure. So ionizing, you have the X-rays machine and the CT scanners. Non-ionizing, you have all the class of MRI, ultrasound machines that are so common that are currently used and nobody really asks what's going on. And these are non-ionizing radiations that are used to scan our body.
All right.
So to me, it's sort of worrying about something that really doesn't exist for two reasons. One, this 5G millimeters waves is not deployed yet. So all these, dead birds and so on, go back to Photoshop.
Okay.
If you deploy the 5G, you are essentially in the middle of these non-ionizing waves that we are proven for 200 years since we have radio, 120 years.
Plus, yeah, 100 plus, probably, yeah. So let's switch gear a little bit and talk about, I don't know if you want to call it politics, but President Trump, in many different occasions, different statements, different press conferences or interviews, he said we, as United States of America, must win the race of 5G. And we've also seen a lot of regulations in the U.S. Blocking specifically Chinese companies to introduce their 5G solutions in the U.S. market. And aren't we supposed to be a free market that's available for everyone? Or and why is it called a race? What's happening there? And one of the arguments that I hear sometimes is that it's a national security risk. Maybe Dan can answer this. Can you shed some light on why it is called race and why some people, just voice their concern that it might be a national security risk?
Well, I don't know why people call it a national security risk. Well, so here's as close as I can figure it out to why they possibly say that. Mm-hmm. So if I buy my chip, right, a computer chip, mm-hmm. and the vendor of that chip, the guy who made it, put some kind of secret back door in it that only he can get to, right, that I don't know about. It's possible, right? Now, in order to listen in on your conversation, I'd have to know you had that handset in your hand. Mm-hmm. And that's not easy. So let's assume I get over that hurdle. Now I have to know who you're talking to. I don't want to listen to every conversation, only the ones that are interesting to me. How do I know you're having an interesting conversation? Well, that's hard. You suppose I want to get both sides. Well, I need to figure out what's in the middle. So I have to decode your conversation and then steer it towards some device in the middle. Mm-hmm. Between you and the person.
It's already there, and we've seen that in Snowden, what he was saying in the program, and that's a reality, not a conspiracy theory, anything. That has been documented that, the NSA listens to, probably they're listening now, I don't know. But
so what the NSA does is it collects phone metadata. We spent billions of dollars and created incredible advances in decoding and analytics, and guess what the result is? Mm-hmm. The government can read your phone bill. Listening in on individual conversations requires knowing the conversation is going on and knowing who to listen to. So we're hiding books in a library. Even if everybody could hear your phone call, mm-hmm. there's still too many phone calls for anyone to really understand what's going on with yours, to really care. So, and don't forget, the government has this thing. If they understand you're making a phone call, every government has this thing, ours included, called lawful intercept. The devices in the middle of the network between you and the person you're talking to, they can steer your conversation.
Correct.
So whether Huawei can do it, or whether the Chinese, or whether Cisco and the US does it, or whoever, pick a name for a country.
Already there. So
it's already there.
Yeah, I guess what you're saying is that it doesn't really matter. It's just what matters is who's listening, rather than whether someone is listening or not.
Well, and don't forget, I've got the whole logistics problem. How do I know? I have to figure out, I want to listen to you talk on that headset. That's not the trivial undertaking you think it is.
Yeah, they don't have they don't have the entire ecosystem to understand, to link things together, I guess. But they still have, I don't know, probably the social media, something like Facebook or whatnot, they have more information, way more information than what we're talking about right now.
Well, that's it. You know, so to a certain extent, privacy is a wonderful, sweet illusion.
Yeah.
People know what you want. And look at how rude the implementation of, look what they're doing with the privacy that they're violating, right? Whenever you go to a website, an ad pops up for that website. Do they really know what you're interested in? No, that's hard. And they've got all the data that they could possibly use to figure it out. Google knows
more about me than what I know about myself. You know, so Manuel, do you have any take on this?
Sure. I'll step back a little bit, and of course, Dan, and you are right in the sense of how difficult it is to extract meaningful data from all this, you know, wave of data that hits every second, right? Millions of phone calls and data calls and watching Netflix. If we step back, the U.S., and I have bad news, U.S. lost the race 10 years ago. It lost the race when it sold to Alcatel, Bell Labs, and Lucent. It lost the race when Canada let Nortel fail and go in bankruptcy. So I'm not sure how you win the race without the people in the race.
Without a horse.
It's something that you need to step back and understand. It takes years of investment.
Yeah, but why is it, regardless of whether we believe it's a race or not, but why that emphasis when the president of the United States come out and specifically talk about 5G and that we have to win that and we're not going to allow China to win that race?
Right, 5G, and I'll show later, I think you can show the picture of the 5G antennas. With millimeter waves, you have a finer granularity in following the people. You have electric poles every 200 feet apart, being able to locate you. As Dan had said, location right now is coarse with the radio towers from LTE. Just look through your window and you'll find radio towers 1-2 kilometers or 1-2 miles away. Now you have radio towers every 200, every 600 feet, every 200 meters. So that's where you have a finer granularity of the data, but it's an illusion again. You'll collect even more data and you'll have an analytical problem to understand exactly, with my accent, by the way, what I'm saying. So the technology of detection is improved with 5G, clear. The technology of analysis will take a few more years to understand and to be able to catch up with this technology. So I think that's where the concern is.
Time to go, I guess. Well, we still have a long way to go with 5G. It's not going to be in 2020 or maybe 2021.
I provided a chart. I provided a chart that I suppose I hope you put it on. The largest deployment of 5G millimeter waves, it's in Chicago, 3.1% starting in 2020 by Verizon.
Okay, yeah.
So all these effects, all these ideas that created COVID, it's lacking the simple basis that 5G is not deployed. What we see on our phone is 5G, it's 4.7G, 4.8G. It's not the real 5G.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I mentioned in a previous video, is that we have countries who have no 5G whatsoever, and they have very high number of cases, COVID-19 cases, and vice versa. We have countries with like large 5G deployments with no case whatsoever, or I can't say no case whatsoever, but very low number compared to anywhere else.
There is no correlation, but even if it's correlation, it's not causation.
So yeah, I get anything. Any of you want to add on, about that particular conspiracy that 5G is COVID-19 is a cover-up for what's going on with 5G. I think we've already covered that question, but any last thoughts or words on this, Dan?
I think we're okay with the millimeter wave part. Is it's used in radar guns and radar detectors today. So if it was a problem, there'd be a lot of people dead already, and there aren't.
Well, the argument is there are people dying because of cancer and everything.
Right, but cancers are a family of diseases. It's not one. It's not only one cause. It's genetic. It's viral. We know viral cancers like cervical cancers in women. We know cancer caused by radiation, X-rays, for people that really abuse the X-ray. So it's not only one. So when we try to establish a cause relationship and effect relationship, really it's sort of easy to put everything in one big pot and say 5G causes cancer.
Yeah. Well, it was great talking to you both. Thanks again for being with us today. It was really a pleasure. And thanks for your time, Manuel and Dan.
Great.
Thank you, Mo. And I'll be available for further questions on email and so on. I like to clarify things. I see a lot of people that have some information, and these are the most dangerous, because they think they know what they are talking about. I'm not denying the fact that they believe in what they're saying, but believing in what you're saying in reality, physical reality, biological reality, is not even close.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Manuel.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care, Mohammed.
Bye.
Bye.
واحب برضو اشكر جميع اللي تابعونا النهارده، ونتمنى تكونوا استفدتوا من الفيديو ده وقدرنا احنا نجاوب على بعض من الاسئله اللي موجوده بخصوص ال 5G. واللي لسه عنده سؤال ممكن يسال في التعليقات تحت الفيديو، واحنا ان شاء الله نحاول نجاوب عليه في اقرب وقت. وما تنساش تشترك معانا في القناه وتشير الفيديو وتعمل لايك وتفعل خاصيه الجرس عشان يوصلك كل فيديو جديد مننا. شكرا والسلام عليكم.